Unser nächster Sprecher, we're going back into English now, is going to talk to us about transforming your digital audience beyond engagement. So if you could give a warm round of applause for Dr. Michael, who? Dr. Michael Wu. There he is, folks.
Hi, guys. So last talk, I know we're running a little bit late. So I'm going to have a beer. All right. So today I'm going to talk to you about how do you transform your digital customers beyond just engagement. I think a lot of people know that they need to engage their customers, but what's after that? And so this is essentially the agenda that I will follow. I'm going to talk about a little bit brief history about how our modern business model came about today. And then we're going to talk about 2 sustained social strategy for engagement or enlistment. Basically, having customer to help you create blogs and co-create a brand narrative. And then we're going to talk to you about like how do you engage your customer deep enough so that you can actually enlist them. So in order to see where we're heading in the future, it's helpful for us to roll back time to understand how we came to be the way we are today. Okay? So let's roll back, say, a few hundred years. And once upon a time, where there's all trade and business essentially happens in one place. And that place is basically the market. All right? Everything regarding that exchange happens there. Whether it's support, whether it's an issue with the product, it's resolved right there face to face. So this has happened for a long time. And then technology came and disrupted the market. The first wave of technology is basically transportation. So transportation basically allows companies and people to do business with other people much further away, right? So as a result, the market grew and became bigger. So this is good, right? Because everybody wants a big market. And the second wave of technology that came about is basically communication. So communication essentially allows companies to operate with much, much greater efficiency. Now, this basically allows company to scale, and so company also get bigger, right? And so this is very good for business, if you're talking about, right? Because everybody loves to have a big company and a big market. So this is all good, but it also created a problem. The problem that it created is it artificially separated the consumer from the company, okay? So because of this, as far as we can remember, almost all the business that we know of operates in what we call the 2 gears model. Right? The 2 gears model is basically acquisition and monetization. Every company have to essentially acquire, and they have to monetize. Now, they focus on what we call transactional efficiency. Basically, the faster you can get people from acquisition to monetization, the better you do. And many of the large brands today are actually doing a pretty good job at this. Right? They're doing a good job at global brands, large enterprise, essentially doing this pretty well. The problem is that technology innovation doesn't stop, right? It keeps on innovating. So the next wave of technology that came and disrupted the market is social media, right? Social media is very disruptive. So there's actually a book that's been published that predicted the disruptive power of social media before social media was even mainstream. Anybody actually heard of this book called Blue Train Manifesto? A lot of you probably have, right? So did you know when was it published? 1996 was the first printing. I think the most recent one was actually 1999, okay? So there were no Facebook and Twitters back then, right? But then the main thesis of this book was that the market landscape have changed again. The market landscape is no longer consists of people. The market is actually consists of conversation, all right? Now, if you can read the subtitle there, it basically says that's the end of business as usual. Whatever you've been doing for the last 100 years is not going to work anymore. So let me ask you guys, where do you think people are having conversation today? Where are people having conversation? Social media, right? Obviously. So now if you are a very practical-minded business owner or CEO, what would you do? What would you do? You probably reason that, okay, if the new market is conversation and people are having conversation on social media, then all I have to do is just acquire on social media, right? Perfectly reasonable. Anybody with any logical mind will come to that conclusion. Therefore, even the market landscape has completely changed, people are still doing this. They acquire and they monetize. The problem is that this is actually neither scalable nor sustainable. Okay? Neither scalable nor sustainable. Why? Why do you think that's the case? The problem is that digital acquisition is actually kind of strange. You don't own what you acquire. You may run a really, really successful marketing campaign and get 1 million followers or 1 million fans, but you don't actually keep those followers. And you don't keep those fans either. Mark Zuckerberg still keeps all those fans for you. Right? So what are you actually acquiring? What are you actually acquiring when you say acquisition here? Any guess? Short-term engagement? Close. What you're acquiring is really people's attention. That's what you're acquiring, right? And it's true. While you capture their attention, you can monetize them. But people's attention shift away very, very quickly. Does anybody know what's the average span of adult attention span? 8.25 seconds, right? Just to put that in context, those goldfish there, they have a memory of 9 seconds. Okay? Goldfish have a memory longer than our attention span. Just put that in context. So what's the implication of that? What that means is that, yeah, you can monetize them while you capture their attention, but people's attention shift away very quickly, so you have to spend the money that you just earned from monetizing them to essentially acquire them back. Right? So can you see how that's not sustainable? You just earn the money, you have to spend it to acquire them back. That's not sustainable, right? So how do you actually turn this two-gear model into a sustainable business strategy in the social world? Well, I had the pleasure to work with this man here, Jeffrey Moore. So Jeffrey Moore is one of the most respected technology advisors in the Silicon Valley. So he's the author of many business classics that some of you probably have read, Crossing the Chasm. And we actually fiddle around with this two-gear model for a long time. And what we come to the conclusion is that with the two-gear model, it's just not going to work. You can't make it sustainable with just two gear. You have to have 4 gear, okay? So remember, just to put that in context, it used to be the case, with company or business owners only have to focus on one thing. They only have to go to market and sell. That's it, right? Now, with the advent of technology, now they have to focus on acquisition and monetization, right? Now, with the disruption of social media, they have to do more, right? They have to do acquisition, and the next thing they have to do is engagement, okay? And then they have to monetize, of course. And then, so what does engagement actually help you? When you are engaging with your audience, you essentially capture their attention for longer, right? When you capture their attention for longer, then you can monetize them longer period of time, right? But after you monetize them, you have to enlist them. Now, enlisting customers is different, okay? So let me tell you a little bit about that. So enlistment actually help you scale your acquisition. Why do you think it helps you scale? If you work in a big company, what is the biggest, how many employees do you typically have? Maybe 100,000? 500,000, right? How many customers do you have? Think about that. Probably millions and tens of millions, right? So if your customers are actually helping you, then you're definitely much more scalable. Now, today, in the social world, people actually don't trust people actually don't trust brands. People trust other customers just like them, right? So if your customers are helping you spreading your brand message, your word of mouth, then not only is that more scalable, it's actually more effective, okay? So now when you get all 4 of these skills all spinning together, right? Basically, you create this positive feedback loop. The positive feedback loop with feedback on yourself, and it's going to sustain, right? But there's a caveat. Not so easy, okay? So the caveat is that you have to get all 4 gears spinning, right? If any one of the gears slows down or comes to a halt, then your whole loop cannot go faster than the slowest gear, right? All right. So basically, like I said before, companies have hundreds of years of practice with acquisition and monetization. What they haven't have is basically engagement and enlistment. Now, both engagement and enlistment are pretty new concept in business, right? Especially enlistment. So engagement, about 5 years ago when I talked to a company, a lot of company or marketers don't know why they need to engage the customers. But 5 years later, today, every single company I talk to know that they need to engage. They may not know what the best way to engage, who to engage, or how to engage, or what's the ROI of engagement. But one thing that they do agree with everybody else is that they need to engage. Okay? Now, enlistment today is like engagement 5 years ago. Company don't know about it. Do you know what enlistment is? Not many people know about it, right? So let me tell you what enlistment is. Enlistment is about leveraging your customer to help you do work that's normally done by your employees. Leveraging your customer to help you do work that's normally done internally within your company. Okay? So advocacy, right, is a form of enlistment because they're helping you do marketing, right? Okay. So how should you think about engagement and enlistment? How should you think about these two concepts? Think of them as two ends of a spectrum. So unlike most people out there believe, engagement is not actually one thing. It's actually many, many things. Engagement consists of, just consumption of content like watching a video, reading your blog, downloading a white paper, right? All the way to like sharing, retweeting, all the way to curating, such as a like, a favorite, or plus one, right? All the way to creating content and co-creating content. When you can get a customer to co-create content with you or co-create product and services with you, they are definitely enlisted. They're definitely enlisted. So when you get to co-creation, they definitely are enlisted. But enlistment doesn't begin, it actually begins much earlier, right? Like I said, when the customer starts sharing with you, when they actually start to share, they are helping your marketing, right? They're helping you do marketing that's normally should be done within your company, right? So think of engagement and enlistment, just two ends of the spectrum. Basically, enlistment is simply the deepest form of engagement, right? And engagement is just a really light form of enlistment, right? Maybe not consume, right? Maybe not consume, but all the way from starting from share, it's actually a very light form of enlistment. Okay, so that's how you should think about engagement and enlistment. So now let's take a look at a couple of examples of what engagement and enlistment can do for you, right? So let's look at in the deep end, right? So how can you leverage customer to help you create content? So you do that with essentially with the total community of a shared interest. So Barclay essentially have a community of shared interests, right? They created a community essentially for travelers to share their travel stories. And so this is a rival. Essentially, they also provide a credit card, a rival credit card. So a lot of people who come up here to read other people's story, they also get exposure to this card. It's a card designed for travelers, okay? So now this community have lots and lots of stories, okay? If you actually look at it, go there, take a look. There are hundreds and hundreds of stories. There's actually a widget that tells you how many stories being shared since, today. And if you go behind this community and look at the analytics, the data behind it, you will see that there's lots and lots of stories being shared. There are actually on the order of like 105,000 stories shared in essentially this 6-month period, right? So that's a lot of story. If you do a simple calculation there, right? This is about 6 months, 180 days, right? And if you take that divided by 180 days, you get about almost 600 stories a day, right? Just imagine how many bloggers or how many like full-time marketing writer you have to hire to generate that much content. That's your ROI there, okay? All right. Basically, this actually helps you create marketing content and drive SEO and drive awareness. So this is actually very powerful. So now let's take a look at another example. We go even deeper, co-creating, right? Getting customer to co-create with you. So what is co-creation? Co-creation, do you really know what co-creation is? People probably here have heard of it, right? So I'm going to talk about leveraging your customer to co-create a brand narrative with you. Why is that important? Because some of the most compelling stories are brand narrative that's co-created with customer. So today, you probably heard a lot about digital storytelling. That's essentially the new age right now. We have every brand is going into digital storytelling. But some of the most compelling stories are actually not story that's created by the brand themselves. They co-created story with the customers, okay? So maybe it's worthwhile to try to understand what is the difference between a story and a narrative. So according to John Hagel, the difference between a story and narrative is basically several things. Okay, so first is that, so for those of you who don't know, John Hagel is the author of The Power of Pull, okay? And so story, think of all the story that you know, all the story that you heard, okay? The story that you heard are typically about somebody else or somebody else telling the story about themselves, right? They typically are not story about you, the listener. The story is never about the listener, right? Think of all the story that you heard before, right? It's usually those stories are about the storyteller himself, or the storyteller is telling a story about somebody else, to you, the listener, right? It's never about the listener. Narrative, on the other hand, is all about you, the listener, okay? Now, why is that important? Because stories are powerful because we can actually relate to them. Okay, we can relate to story. That's why they move us to do things, right? But if you have something that is about you, what does that mean? That means they are infinitely relatable, right? So brand narratives are very powerful, extremely powerful. All right, another difference between a story and a narrative is that, so story typically have a beginning and the middle and the end. It's a well-defined structure, right? It ends, right? But narratives are typically open-minded. They're open-ended, okay? What does that mean? If the story is about you and they're open-ended, that means you have the power to determine how the story goes, right? You have the power to determine the course of the story and the end, how it goes and how it ends, right? So think about this. This is very powerful because actually it's more motivating, right? It gives the listener a sense of autonomy. They could change the story. They could determine how the story goes, all right? All right. So let me give you an example what that a brand narrative is, okay? So Barclays, again, Barclays have essentially this brand narrative. Their brand narrative is that we are your bank and we listen to you, the audience, the listener, right? So that is the brand narrative. It's about you because we listen to you, right? So they actually created a community, and then within this community, people can actually submit their ideas, how they could improve their product and services. So you see some of the latest ideas. And in this area, you can actually vote for some of the ideas. You can see some of the most popular ones. And what Barclay did is that they take some of the most popular ideas and actually implement them. Okay, actually implement it. So this is one of the story that's submitted, one of the ideas that's submitted by customer that they actually implement. Right? So they actually say, okay, you have these digital egos in your branch, but when we are having trouble with our phone or our digital gadgets, we are at home, we're lost, we're stuck somewhere, right? So why don't you send your digital egos out to help us, okay? So one day they actually, send, if you tweet this hashtag, digital ego SOS, they will come to you, okay? They will actually come help you resolve your digital issue, whatever it is, okay? So they actually, roam the street of London one day and just go into people and help them, okay? So this is how the brand narrative works, right? Because now they can say, like, you asked for this, right? And we implement it. This is how we listen to you. This is why we are your bank, right? But there are many, many stories that could happen, right? So some of the ideas that people actually ask for is, for example, see here, they said, the bank actually says, you said it's important to support young people, right? You, the audience, the listener said it's important to support young people. So we actually, give people these young people education and teach them about personal finance management, so on and so forth, right? So there are actually many, many stories, but they all have one narrative. Is that the Barclay is your bank. They listen to you. This is how they listen to you, okay? Every single idea, your idea, right, can be the next story that they implement. Make sense? OK. All right. So there's actually many of these stories. You can actually go on there and take a look, right? They actually implemented many ideas from the customers. OK, so they actually did this with a community with a shared purpose. Now, I talk a lot about this total community, right? This notion of a total community. What do you think that is? So to understand that, we have to understand what is the difference between a social network and a community. So a social network is basically a social structure that's held together by interpersonal relationship, whereas a community is a social structure held together by common interests. Right? All of you are presumably bloggers or in social media, right? That's your common interest. That's what holds this community together, right? Now, it doesn't mean that social network doesn't have common interests. Right? Social network may have common interests, right? But they're not required. Take a look at your Facebook friends, right? Take a look at all your Facebook friends. I'm sure you know someone who doesn't have a common interest with you. But are you going to unfriend them? Are you going to unfriend those people who don't have the same interests as you do? You're not. Obviously not, right? Because that's not what holds you together. That's not what holds you and that person together. What holds you together is the friendship, right? It's the relationship that holds you together. So community, on the other hand, is just the reverse of that. It's just the reverse, OK? What holds the community together, just as all of you here, right? We are a community, right? So we have some common interests around social media and blogging. That's the common interest. But some of us may have relationship. Like my wife is here sitting in the audience. We have relationship. But a lot of you I just met for the first time, right? So relationship is not required, OK? So that's the difference between social network and community. Now, it turns out that the most important word in the definition of social network is that these relationships are pre-existing. They already exist, OK? So academics, professors, and researchers have actually surveyed people's Facebook friendship. And what they find is that over 99% of people's friendship on Facebook, they were actually first established somewhere else, right? If you actually look at your own Facebook friends, do you know them on Facebook, or do you know them somewhere else and then get connected on Facebook? It's obviously the latter one, right? Obviously, right? So that begs for a question, right? If these relationships will already exist, they already exist, right? So where were they first established? They were not established on social network. Where were they first established? What do you think? So it turns out they were actually first established in some community, okay? Community is in which a weak tie gets built into a strong tie. And then they get maintained on social network. Look again in your own Facebook friends, among your Facebook friends. Look at all your Facebook friends, right? You share some common community with them in the past, right? Whether it's the same kindergarten that you went to, same college you went to, same company that you work with them, right? Those are the community in which you build those weak ties into strong ties. And that's why they are maintained in your social network today. That's why they're your Facebook friends today. Okay? So basically, community is the structure that helps you build weak ties into strong ties. And social network is essentially the structure that helps you maintain those strong ties after they were built, after they become strong ties, right? So now, with that understanding, you realize that there's actually a difference between social network and community, right? They're not the same, but they complement each other, right? They're not competitive with each other, right? They're actually, in our life, we have community. We are part of many community, and we also have our social network. They actually complement each other, right, in our relationship building. So what is the true community for a brand? Let me ask you guys this. What is a real, true community for a brand? The question you have to ask yourself, what is all the people who have a common interest in the brand, right? Who are all the people who have a common interest in the brand? Well, I mean, if you look at this 4-gear model, right? This 4-gear model is you can actually look at it this way. This is where you monetize. That's within the company, right? Because you want to, I mean, you can monetize outside, but then you either give your money away or building somebody else's brand, right? So you want to monetize. So this is basically the enterprise property, right? And then outside here is basically where you acquire people is where the public social medias are. These are the YouTube, the Twitter, the Facebook. These are properties that you don't own and you have no control of, right? You don't control any of those properties, right? So if one day Facebook decided to shut down everything, you can't do anything about it, okay? So now, what's the area between this outside world, this public social channel, and the internal enterprise? This is what we call traditionally an online community, right? Because an online community, a brand can host an online community, right? So this is a social area, it's a community, it's social, but it's also kind of part of the brand because the brand owned it, right? So it's kind of this area between the outside world and the enterprise world, right? So what is a total community then? A total community is basically a group of people that's held together by the common interest around the brand, right? So who are all the people who have a common interest in the brand? So certainly, customers have a common interest in the brand, right? And probably prospects too, right? What other people have a common interest in the brand? How about employees? Do employees don't care about the brand? They certainly do, right? So you have to, they're part of your community too, right? How about influencers and partners and product experts, right? So actually, your brand's total community actually includes people who are much wider than the people who are on your online community, okay? So basically, if you actually then take a look at where are all these people, right? So certainly, customers, they may be on your, some customer may be on your community, but some customer may be outside in the social web, right? And then prospects are probably out outside in the social web because they don't know your community exists yet. Your employees are actually inside your company, right? And then your influencers and partners are also maybe outside, maybe part of your community as well, right? So these people are all over the place. So your total community have to be a platform that's able to engage these people wherever they are, right? Wherever they are. So keep in mind, in order to co-create with your customer, you have to engage them with your total community, right? You can't do it without the employee, right? If your customer is telling you, okay, I want the digital egos to help me, and then you just ignore it, think about what does that do to your brand narrative? This is a bank who doesn't listen to you, right? So in order to co-create a brand narrative that's very powerful with your customers, you have to involve your total community. Your customers, your prospects, your influencers, your employee, everybody who have a common interest in your brand need to get involved, right? Okay, so with that, that's it. And I have written, if you want to learn more about this 4-gear model, I've written a couple of books. This is called Science of Social and Science Social 2. And you can download them if you scan the QR code. So let's see if there's any questions. I know you guys all want to go out and get a drink, and I do too. So, but if you do have some questions, I'm happy to answer them here. Thank you.
Dr. Wu, thank you very much. And we're in Germany, and in Germany, there's a law that if you're the last speaker and at the final hour, you're not allowed to take questions and answers until you finished your beer.
Is that a challenge?
No. No, thank you. I mean, we're out of time, but I just wanted to say thank you very much. It was a great presentation. We appreciate you coming. Let's give him a big round of applause, everybody. Dr. Wu, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.